you will watch this movie review, and then you will subscribe to my channel, and then you will go see this hilarious spoof of classical vampires. These are also the droids you are not looking for. I'm sorry guys, I had to do it. I couldn't resist. The best way to explain this movie without giving too much away is that it's a spoof of vampires, and it's done in a documentary style way that pretty much resembles reality TV. And mainly the film explores these four vampires living together and their relationship and their struggles with modern society. You got your stereotypical four classic vampires in this movie. You got the oldest one, which is so old, he's like 800 years old, that he looks like a more Nosferatu vampire. Then you got the medieval vampire that's called Vlad, who is ultimately a spoof of Vladimir the Impaler. Then there's the aristocrat vampire that is more logical and ultimately becomes more of an annoyance for the rest of the roommates that feel that he's too naggy. And then you got the youngest vampire that's only 100 and something years old, who is the more rebellious type and the most unpredictable of the four. Of course, these roommates clash, and you get some really comedic moments at the very beginning, especially when the rebellious vampire doesn't want to wash the dishes, feeling that vampires shouldn't have to wash dishes. And he's been putting it off for 5 years. It was a lot of bloody dishes. This is a film that does not play off the Twilight vampires, even though they are mentioned maybe like one small point in the movie, but it also doesn't play off of what we expect from a modern day vampire. Instead, it uses all the classical elements of the old vampire tales and movies. These vampires die in the sunlight, they can't touch crucifixes, they can't be seen in mirrors, and they even have to be invited in order to get into a building. Which also comes to another funny moment when they're trying to pick up victims to suck their blood, and they go to these clubs, but they can't get in because the bouncer won't invite them in, and it becomes a little bit of a predicament there. These vampires can hypnotize, they can turn into beasts and turn into bats. It's all the classical things you would expect a vampire to do, and it's done hilariously. There is a lot of wit, charm, and just downright funny moments in this film. It feels so wrong that a vampire spoof can make me laugh as hard as I did. The one downside to this whole ordeal is that ultimately it feels like a bunch of skits all sewn together to make one movie. Now that's not that big of a deal because the skits feel so clever and just so funny that it can be forgiven. It just feels that way because it ultimately doesn't feel like there's an overall arcing story that melds everything together, and it's more of just going through life of these vampires and these little teeny struggles that they have throughout the movie. But that's a little bit more forgivable because in this movie, all the characters have their own arc, and it feels complete by the end of the film. Now, are these character arcs well defined? Not really. The little points that complete each character's story arc are so scattered through the movie, and then they all come together like very quickly in the last 10 minutes. So in that sense, it is a little scattered and a little chaotic, but ultimately, if a film can make you laugh as much as I laughed in this film, then you gotta give it credit. It takes all the classical elements of vampires and mixes it in a way that we don't really think about too often, making it more clever than it should be. The whole world that the film is set in feels a lot more realized, and that's always a very good thing for a film. So What We Do in the Shadows gets 4.5 stars. So have you seen What We Do in the Shadows? what did you think about? Go ahead and comment. I'm open for discussions. And if you have not seen the movie, then what is your favorite comedy horror? Or maybe more specifically, what is your favorite horror comedy that involves a documentary style? As always, this is Bruce Gifford, and this was Just My Opinion.